And this speaks to a question that Professor Brooks asked to Ademola, Olubufola, and Dinga earlier on the legacy of Weusi. There's an exhibition at Kenkeleba now called Weusi 55, and you should all go see it. And tomorrow afternoon from 2 to 6, I think.
3 to 6.
3 to 6. There's a panel on the legacy of the Black Arts Movement in the 21st century. So that's, and that's on way East 2nd Street. So go do that, and I'll plug it again later. So thank you, Brian, thank you, James.
Can you describe the cultural environment in which you were creating art, especially in the 70s?
Yes. In the 70s, there was a lot going on, and I had arrived in New York, and I came to New York from Florida to attend graduate school at Pratt Institute, and I wanted to get involved in the arts because I had majored in art at FAMU, and my professor was Dr. Samela Lewis, and she encouraged me to seek out other artists. And when I did that, I ended up in Lower Manhattan. I went to Norman Lewis's studio, and he was working, and he was a hard worker, and exposed me to people like Ernest Critchlow and Romy Bearden. I was just overwhelmed, and I was filled with a desire and energy to continue hitting the streets and meeting artists. So at the corner of Houston and 6th Avenue, there was this little gallery. It probably wasn't as big as a newspaper stand, but it was Nigel Jackson's gallery. And that's where he started. And so I showed him my work, he accepted it, and he showed me the beginnings of a long career. I had my first one-man show in that little space, and boy, was it crowded. The people couldn't get inside, and many people were pressing their faces against the window to see what was going on and so forth. And that was my beginning, and that was my introduction to Nigel. Well, he was successful at that time in that little space, and later decided that he needed a bigger space because every time he would do a show, it would just be crowded. And so he went to 15 Charles Street, and he opened a gallery at 15 Charles Street, and he had many successful shows there leading up to the rebuttal.
So there's a lot of history in what you just said. What was it like studying art at a Black college?
At FAMU, I was very proud because most Black colleges had 2 professors in their art department. We had 7.
Wow.
And Dr. Lewis was there, and she was head of the art department. And we had, in each area, we had a professor. We had a ceramics professor, we had a design professor, we had a painting professor, we had a drawing professor, we had an art history professor, and an art appreciation professor. So it was really...
Yeah. It's not because it's interesting because Hill Woodruff, when he got back from Paris in 31, he founded the art department, he and Elizabeth Prophet founded the art department there at the University Center. So the model of Black colleges and the fact that Black colleges had Black professors, had Black professors teaching art, it's an interesting kind of scenario because I remember David Driscoll was commenting on his work at Fisk and the kind of extra work because it wasn't just, oh, you come to class, right? You come to class and I teach you. No, it was a whole bunch of life stuff around it, so like nurturing.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So you had Samela Lewis. I mean, what was that like?
Oh, Samela Lewis had 2 doctorates, and she was a heavyweight. And she not only had you in an art class, she taught you to be demanding and militant, and this was pre-civil rights, leading up to the civil rights movement. And she had this philosophy about you being involved in the community, and a lot of people don't know this. Samantha Lewis left before I graduated because the governor of Florida had her investigated for encouraging students to go to the lecture counters. And she had to leave. And so she ended up going upstate New York and teaching there for a while and eventually moving to California.
Wow. So, in some way that sounds like Angela Davis, like the governor of the state. Is it leading to fire black women from,
Yes, that happened.
Right.
That happened.
I mean, so what kind of example is that when you have an outspoken professor, an historian, someone so important not just to the history of African American art, but the history of American art, right? And then she's kind of punished in that particular way. I mean, what kind of example did it leave for you as artists who are being trained? Well, so not only is he trained in professionalism, right, and rigor, this idea of rigor and professionalism. Her example was also someone who's going against the cultural norms and expectations of a black professor, right? Let's not forget a black professor, right? Which means that you're in a leadership position in somewhere like Florida, because it's not just on the campus. When you get outside the campus, you're also respected, right, outside the campus, right? Of
course,
you know. And so here she is doing her job, and then she gets punished, and so she has to leave. Like, what did that do to the student body?
Oh, we were upset, but it didn't stop us from expressing what she advised us to do. And many, many times, sitting at the lunch counters and all of that was a part of what we took from her, as well as the training in art, all right? And being a young athlete, I was on an athletic scholarship and I was studying art, which at the time wasn't too popular because I had to go to practice, and all the guys would say, oh, you're over there in the art department, and that's where all the girls are, because the girls would be majoring in secondary education, elementary education, and it was required that they had art courses. So I saw that problem. I got a list of the girls, and when I would go to practice, I would have a list of girls, and the guys were jealous of me. So it worked out, you know. And one other thing, I traveled to South Dakota to a large international track meet, and at the time, the lunch counters and the police and all that stuff, they were really involved with the students and getting them to, you know, not do this. But then in South Dakota, an American Indian guy came up to me and he said, oh, I see that you have on a shirt that says you're from Florida. And he knew about everything that was happening. He said, come with me. I'm going to take you down to McCourt's Five and Dime, and I'm going to get you a Coke and a hamburger. And I said, no, I don't want what's happening in Florida to happen to me in South Dakota. So I went anyway, and it all worked out. But he took it upon himself to say, listen, it's not going to happen here, come with me.
Right, you're in a safe space.
Yes.
It was interesting, it's like, let's say, so your artistic training, right, went hand in hand with your social training.
Yes.
And so outside of the campus, right, you have to deal with this intense racism, right? So outside of the campus, you are acted upon by racism, right, outside of the campus. And so this idea of breaking boundaries, did it sort of translate between your life just as a black man in the South and kind of political stuff that works on you, right, in terms of racism, and your ability to sort of break boundaries in terms of the arts? Did those two things translate?
Absolutely. Here's what happened. The people in the art department, that one department, there was such love expressed in terms of you being a student and them having to offer you exposure to art. Like when I came from high school, I didn't have an art teacher. when I met Samela Lewis, and she took us into the High Renaissance and the Sistine Chapel and the works of Europe and all of that stuff, that opened my eyes.
Sure.
But at the same time, when she would give you a dose of being militant and demanding, that also was a part of me.
Right.
And when she left, it stayed with me.
Right.
And until many years later, when I encountered her in New Orleans at an art show, and I walked in, and when she saw my face, she says, "I know who you are." You know, so great experience.
And so like, okay, so the slides in class, that's like a library, right?
Yes,
As
yeah.
an artist, you're taking the language in, right? You're taking
Yeah.
all the influences in, right? And so when you talk about the Renaissance, and you're going and you're having this sort of segregated American experience, but then you're seeing European art, right? And like you're studying the fundamentals of composition, you're learning a particular history. I mean, did you know the Western canon was yours, or did you accept it as yours at that time?
What happened was that they made sure, Dr. Lewis did, that we were aware of the great African art traditions, all right? And then some of the professors who were teaching at the university, they had careers before they were allowed to become professors in their profession. My design professor had majored in automobile design, okay? But at the same time, when he came to be a professor in the art department, he had this vast knowledge of design techniques and so forth. So that was something that was imparted. The gentleman who did ceramics, he was really a master.
Yeah.
So when you got all of this and you were surrounded by 7 people, and you had to be on your toes all the time, I really appreciated it. And luckily for me, after graduation, being a student of good grades, I became an instructor at FAMU as a result of these people. So that was my first job.
Yeah, how did you come up to be a teacher? You were the first teacher, how did you come up to be a teacher?
I had a classroom full of girls. They all came. I don't think that the art department ever had a class at that time that there would be more than 15 girls. I had 30 sometimes, you know, and they had to move in a larger space. But this was a rich beginning, all right? And then after that, I decided, gee whiz, I'm teaching all these courses. So if a professor was leaving to go to the University of Pennsylvania to work on a doctorate degree, I had to pick up his classes.
Right.
And then another one would go on a sabbatical, I had to pick up that class.
Get skills.
Yeah, right. So after going through that regiment of filling in for people who were advancing, I decided, you know something? I'm going to New York.
Yeah.
I want to be a real artist, so I'm gonna hit the streets and I'm gonna find out. And so when I got here, through Norman Lewis, I was able to meet Ernest Critchlow, who lived on Green Street in Brooklyn, right down the street from Pratt, and it was just marvelous.
Now, from Florida to New York,
Yes.
that's a lot of territory.
Oh, yes.
Right? Not just
Yes.
physical territory,
Right.
but maybe mental territory.
Yes.
Right? So how was the sort of transition from one space to another mentally?
I quickly learned.
Mm-hmm.
Once I hit the streets of New York, as I explained yesterday at the exhibit, I was very poor and I had to have art supplies and so forth, and I learned to find my art supplies in the streets of New York.
Yeah.
I would go to the garment district on Thursday evenings. The week's work in producing garments would be whatever was left was put in the dumpsters.
Right. Yeah.
And I could get it for free,
Right.
you know? So I took the paper that they used for the patterns, and I took the cloth that they were throwing away, and I had a Volkswagen,
Yeah.
and I filled the back seat with my materials, and I hit it off.
Did they say you couldn't use fabric?
No, never, you know. But my professors were amazed at the fact that I could use it so well. And as I explained, I had childhood training in the use of fabric.
Right.
Because my grandmother was a professional quilt maker. and I had to cut patterns.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Like so many of us come from people who make things, right? So
Right.
you could be a carpenter, you could be a quilt maker,
Right.
and then you may be the first in your generation, the first in your family to turn those artisan crafts into
Right.
arts
Right.
skills,
Right.
right?
Right.
And so in that particular like translation, no, what was Norman Lewis like?
Norman Lewis
Yeah.
was a hard-working artist,
Mhm.
okay? And he didn't put up with a lot of nonsense in relationship to you claiming to be an artist. If you were going to be an artist, you had to be an artist. And he had a salty mouth that would tell you that that's what you're supposed to do. Right. And that's who he was.
Mhm.
Really, no kidding.
It's just straight no chaser.
No chaser. No
Right.
chaser. That was Norman.
How are you affected by it? Because you're coming from an environment like the South, and you say you want to be a professional artist.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you get all the stuff that's going on in Florida, you say you want to go to the center of the art world, and you want to be a professional artist. And then here's Norman Lewis with his own story.
Right.
You know, what did he tell you? What did he tell you?
He said, listen, if you're going to paint, paint from your heart and your soul.
Mhm.
Whatever you have to do to promote yourself in terms of your painting, don't try to be something else. Be an artist. Don't try to be a sportsman, don't try to be this or that. If you're going to live the life of an artist, you've got to sacrifice and do whatever you want to do in terms of your artistic expression. That was it.
Yeah, that's a
But you can see it when you walk down his place. I was overwhelmed. You could see it. I mean, he never stopped working, you know.
That's a particular generation too, because I'm thinking about the people Norman Lewis hung out with, right?
Mhm.
Just in terms of even at the idea of the Cedar Bar, right?
Right,
Those
right.
guys like
12th Street, yes.
and all that. And so, you know, in New York at that time, especially in Lower New York, you had this. It's not quite the same as in jazz, right? You had the sort of after hours, the white
Yeah,
musicians and the
yeah.
black musicians would play
Yeah,
together.
yes.
You know, and Norman Lewis had a lot of white peers, right? Just in terms of
Absolutely.
the people that he hung out with socially.
Right.
But he didn't necessarily get a chance to exhibit with the professionals.
No,
Right,
he
so-
wasn't accepted. His work wasn't accepted on the level that their work was accepted.
Mhm.
You see, and throughout the lower Manhattan, in the loft areas where those artists were working at the time, they considered themselves as bankers because they were making so much money,
Mhm.
you know?
Yeah.
And then I don't think that Norman had the same representation or the same collectors
Mhm.
after his work that they had,
Right.
you know?
Yeah, even though they were social together.
Yes, yes.
So as a younger artist, and you see this, how did you make sense, or could you make sense out of that? Just-
I could make sense out of it in that what Dr. Lewis taught me, encountering someone like Norman,
Mhm.
it's like being prepared for battle,
Wow.
okay?
Wow.
If you're a soldier, you go through training,
Uh-huh.
you know, and the possibility of death is put on the back burner.
But you're
The-
an artist. Death.
Yeah.
I mean, but those are the terms.
Yes,
right?
yes,
Those are the terms.
yes. That's put on the back burner, and you go forward.
I mean, forged in segregation. Those terms were forged in a segregated reality. So on the one hand, I'm like, you're an artist, so I should be thinking this war terminology. But then on the other hand, I'm like, you grew up in intense segregation in
Right.
a context in which
Absolutely.
black people were terrorized,
Mhm.
right? And then here you are, what then you take from that lesson, the lessons of your own life, and so when you get to New York, it makes sense. You know, it makes sense.
Well, you see, I think I came from a strong background.
Uh-huh.
Living with parents, see, my grandparents were basically the people who took care of me, because during World War II, my uncles and older men in the community who were eligible for the war, they were gone,
Mhm.
okay? And so that left my mother and two of us, my other brother. She couldn't do what my father could do when he was there. So my grandparents said, listen, we got them, let them come here.
Mhm.
And then when I went there, that was a household that was very productive.
Mhm.
You know, I mean, very productive.
Yeah.
And so it made me stronger as a child.
Right.
And then being around a creative environment through my grandmother, I knew what I wanted to be because I had people in the community say, oh, let him take piano lessons. He could be Louis Jordan. No piano for me. And then there were people who bought me boxing gloves. Be Joe Louis, No, I'm not going to be Joe Louis, And so this was what it was all about. You had these things to overcome.
But the example of, you say, oh, I want to be Norman Lewis.
Yeah.
Joe Louis.
Right.
Then where is the sort of black painter or the black sculptor or the black performance artist that you can say, that person is on the same tier as these people that you want me to be.
Mm-hmm.
But, right, so there wasn't necessarily an example, I don't think, as a kid. Maybe tenor, but that's...
Well, actually, the thing was that Norman said, be who you are. And he gave me a scare. He said, anything else you try to do, you're going to fail. So...
No plan B.
No plan B. Just be that, And so that's it.
Yeah.
And then the good fortune of running into Nigel Jackson in that little corner. The studio gallery wasn't as big as that area over there, And so he started to attract artists from all over New York, African American artists, And he had to get a bigger place. And you see, Nigel was completely committed to what he was doing. He was a good promoter. He organized well, and he interviewed. You could go in with your stuff under your arm and everybody. He interviewed everybody, and he would give you a shot. He would start you out as a part of a group show, and then you move from the group show to a solo show. And so that was very encouraging because where else was I going to go? There were no other galleries that I could go in and do anything.
That's a heck of a reality.
Right.
So you get to New York, and was in your mind, were you like, well, I can be at this prestigious gallery, or someday I'm going to end up in the Met, or so? Was that in your mind, or were you just want to football?
Never thought about that. As things developed over the years, and I had several shows, and I got recognition, other collectors started to come and purchase my work. All right. So as they started to purchase my work, Nigel knew what people to tap to get to the shows. He advertised extensively, and through word of mouth, people would come.
So you support it?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I ended up having John and Vivian Hewitt from the Hewitt collection. They collected quite a bit of my work, and I often laugh about it because they would go out on the weekend looking for African American art, and Mrs. Hewitt would come downtown, and Mr. Hewitt would go uptown, and then and they would bring back what they found. And they had many functions at their place, and as a result
of interracial functions in which people would meet, or
oh yeah. Some bankers would be at the shows and make a purchase and so forth. And back then, I think the first painting I sold through Nigel Jackson was $165.
Which is something.
Yeah, that was something. Yeah. Because the subway was 15 cents. And I had a lot of money. So, yeah.
What was the environment like in terms of your peers, and how were you living when you got to New York? Like, how were you living?
Well, actually, I came to New York thinking that I was going to go to the university out in Brooklyn, like the university that I attended in Florida. And it was on a Saturday, and they told me to take the A train. Yeah, I took the A train to Brooklyn. And then they told me to get off at Lafayette Avenue. All right? Well, everybody on the train, when I stepped on the train, everybody on the train looked at me because they realized that, listen, this guy is not from here, so they were
How did they know? Like, how would that?
Because I had on a Palm Beach suit. And so they told me to get off at Lafayette Avenue and walk down to Pratt Institute. Well, I did. And when I got there, the big iron gate was locked.
Oh, man, okay. Yeah.
And so I had to walk back up DeKalb Avenue in Brooklyn,
Mm-hmm.
and I saw a sign that said furnished room.
Uh-huh.
So I knocked on the door, and the people said, well, you have to go to Oxford Avenue to find the landlord. Maybe he'll rent you a room, right?
Uh-huh.
Oh, that was terrible, because he put me through the ringer. I said, I have money. He said, but do you have a job?
Mm.
No, I don't have a job. I said, but I had to convince him that I could pay. And I stayed there until I could get a job. And I got a job, you know, because being from Florida, I had training in life saving.
Mm-hmm.
I was a dog,
Like a
yeah, lifeguard.
lifeguard.
Yeah, at the beaches. So I still have my certificates. You know? And so with my certificates,
Were they surprised when you saved the life? With the person you saved, were they surprised that?
well, actually, I only saved 2 lives in all of that in Florida on the 4th of July. You know, there was a guy charging 75 cents a boat ride. And these 2 ladies got in the boat and they went around, you know, and when they came back, just before the landing, one of them caused the boat to kind of capsize and they both fell out. You know, and I had to get them, so I did. And for my years there, I worked there until I was 25 years old, and I never lost a life, so I thank God for that. Yeah.
It seems like everything, I remember I was talking with the painter James Little, and he was saying how just the work routine of his parents prepared him to be an artist. About how in his community, the people who worked were so thorough that as a kid, he understood how to work with rigor just by watching the adults in his neighborhood, right? Just by watching his parents.
Right.
And you go from that experience to college, and in that experience, you know, people are encouraging you. And that's the other side of segregation that's really interesting, because people tend to think, oh yes, the oppression, but there's also a lot of love, right? And so the people in the community, when they see a talented young person, they say, oh yeah, take these boxing gloves, right? That's where you need Joel, so take this, right? And so you can funnel that encouragement into this journey to New York.
Right.
This real boyish journey into New York, because it's something that happens psychologically as a kid, that's ingrained in you. Then you meet Mello Lewis, right? Further ingrained, right? And then you meet Norman Lewis. Right. So it seems like, you know, you're going from one step to another step to another step, example to example to example, and then Norman Lewis gives you that uncensored realness. Realness about, not that being an artist is like being a member of clergy, right? But it is a sort of dedication. Commitment.
Life's commitment.
Life's commitment.
You know?
Yeah.
And I still have that. From all the way back when those people along my path who I encountered set me straight and showed me that, listen, it can be done. This is who you are. Okay? You've got to be true to yourself. Because if you venture off from really knowing yourself, you're going to, as Norman said, you're going to fail. You got to be who you are.
Who are you hanging out with?
Well, actually, back there, I was really fascinated by Jacob Lawrence. And Jacob Lawrence was teaching in the undergraduate school at Pratt at the time. And one day, I was in the studio building, and he showed up.
Jacob Lawrence.
And
you just say like, okay, you're studying, whatever. You know what Jacob Lawrence looks like. You know when he's around, right? But then the magnitude, the magnitude of seeing Jacob Lawrence and him being accessible there. How did you approach it?
I followed him. He was going up the stairs, and I followed him. And I was a little nervous, but I followed him. And just before he went into his classroom where he was going to teach, the studio room where he's going to teach, I said, Mr. Lawrence. And he turned around, and I put my hand out. He shook my hand. And I said, I'm not in one of your classes, but I just wanted to meet you. I've read a lot about you, I've heard a lot about you, and so forth. Because in my Florida studies, Jacob Lawrence's poetry, he did a piece on, who was that?
Tucson?
No, not Tucson. He did, what's his name? Jesse Jackson. It was on the cover of Time magazine.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, Yeah, and Jacob Lawrence did the piece.
Mhm.
And so, I had that piece, I had saved that magazine, and I wanted to let him know. And so from that day forward, we stayed in communication, and just before he passed away, I visited him in Seattle,
Right.
you know, at his studio.
That's interesting. So in New York, you were younger than the established artists,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so this is generational thing that's
Yes,
happening?
yes.
Like, how do you see yourself in sort of generational dialogue? Just in terms of the older artists and the younger artists like yourself who are really trying to make it? Like, was there real communication beyond?
Well, you know, interesting that you said that. Nigel Jackson said to me, once we became very good friends, he said, listen, you're picking up the baton, because he knew that I had been involved in track. And he said, you're taking the baton to the next level. Okay, somebody passed it off to you, and you're running your distance, and you got to pass it off to someone else.
So just in terms of your practice, do you see do you see your practice as having a legacy of its own, or just in terms of the work you make, do you see an influence out there that you can appreciate in terms of the younger artists, or?
Yes, I think that I have been quite fortunate to have had the New York experience, to have had the acquaintance of people like Nigel Jackson and so forth. But now I'm getting a new experience. I live in the Sea Islands of South Carolina, and the Sea Islands have always been isolated from the mainland, but now they have roads and bridges and everything. But the Sea Island people, because they've been isolated, I'm surrounded by artists of great magnitude. If you see the baskets that they make, and Highway 17 going to Myrtle Beach, there are miles and miles of African Americans who just create baskets of extreme beauty, you know? And when you're around these people, and they can take seagrass and pine straws and create with it, it's a reinforcement for me, you know? So I bring something to them, and they bring something to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my New York experiences with acts of art and everything is up to here. Yes. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
We're gonna take, because everybody is probably ready, we're gonna take a 5-minute break.